Welcome to a Thanksgiving edition of the Kingdom of Pod. This is the Kingdom of Pod, a commitment to Boise State football each and every week. A look at what the Broncos are up to, of course, as they face San Diego State. We're going to break that game down shortly. It's all brought to you by Bet Online. We'll give you the offensive and defensive breakdowns with Boise State and San Diego State. Very, I guess, a matchup that we're very familiar with at this point. The college openings involving Coach Pete, Justin Wilcox, and Brian Harsin. Is there smoke and fire or both? What about Dan Hawkins? What's he done for UC Davis and how he's got that program soaring into the FCS playoffs, which start? And I took a little deeper dive into the University of Utah and how they have built their offensive and defensive lines, which consistently kick the Pac-12's ass. Let's get down to the bottom line, though. It's Thanksgiving week. Here I am recording early. I'll be headed up north to Guyman, Oklahoma, but of course I'll be enjoying food, family, and as most of us, some football. So the best side dish for your turkey is a little bit of action on the game. Bet Online has you covered all this holiday season. It's the number one spot for sports action. You can head to this new updated desktop or mobile website they've put together. Sign up today for Bet Online. You get a 50% welcome bonus. You just have to use the promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get your bonus. That's Bet Online and BLEAV on the promo code. All right, let's get back to this breakdown with Boise State and San Diego State. I'll get to the ramifications of the game. Of course, we all know there's a lot on the line, but we know what isn't here, and there's no more Rocky Long leading San Diego State or leading this defense. It's the second year away. They just finished with Rocky and the New Mexico defense, which I think should concern everybody as much as anything. Boise State's offense struggled mightily against New Mexico's defense. There wasn't much comment about that post-game. I don't know. I'm sure they ultimately got to it with coordinator talk with the Monday conversations, but it wasn't happening post-game. And so everybody had a little different idea, I think, that sat in front of a TV set and had 24 to 48 hours to think it through, as coaches do, and look at film, but they just didn't get it done. And, one of the biggest challenges I find with the Boise State offense is it's great when Helani's in there. It's even better when Helani and Shakir are on the field at the same time. But they lack weapons after that. Really, the complementary wide receivers, the complementary tight end pass game, the consistent identity with what the offense can do to somebody beyond just those two guys or with those two guys. And really, some of the keys to all of this are the total effort of the group with the offensive line mixed in, and Hank Bachmeier. Hank Bachmeier is a serviceable quarterback. He's a way above average quarterback. He is not an elite quarterback. He is not one of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of Boise State football. He may become that next year, but he is not that difference maker now. And I think that's one of the things that lacks, because he's not a weapon you come up with. He's a complimentary guy who can distribute. He knows the offense. The kids trust him. The coaches trust him. He's got that down, but he doesn't have the kind of moxie or make the kind of throws or really have the kind of mobility when you need it the most to be the difference maker in himself. He's no Shakir to the team in some respects. He's no Helani in some respects, because he's been the constant there the whole time, and he struggles at times to be that difference and make everybody else great. How about making the tight ends great or those other wide receivers great? It may not just be his ability to be that person, to be the next Ryan Dinwiddie, in some respects Bart Hendricks, or even a Grant Hendricks. I mean, he could never run like Hendricks could run, but he had such a tremendous senior season to lead the team. And we don't even need to bring up Kellen Moore. But anyway, that's to me one of the biggest missing ingredients. But here comes San Diego State's defense. They don't allow points. They're number one in the Mountain West Conference. Nobody runs the ball on them. They still run this 3-3-5. They've got former Aztec defensive players on their staff that are now position coaches. They're still teaching Rocky's system. Even the analyst for the San Diego State football team is a very seasoned 30-plus year defensive line coach. The Boise State run game has been great with Helani back in charge since that Fresno game. Without Stets at center, who knows? Let's face it. Whoever gets put back in at center, if they can bring Farrar back or Harrington, not as good. It wasn't working. And at this point in the season, that's got to be a huge concern. And I don't say these things for shock or effect. That's all BS. This is it, man. This game for both these teams is really what their Mountain West season's all about. So you are who you are at this point. And I have concerns about the Boise State offensive line without Stets at center. You go back to issues with the snaps. You've got the best defensive line in the conference. So if Filani can get yards and the offensive line comes up with their best effort of the year plus 25%, which is entirely possible. I've seen, you've seen, we've all seen great Boise State efforts when their backs are against the wall. We've seen it this year, and it can happen again. But if Boise State gets one-dimensional, gets behind the chains on second and long, third and long, San Diego State's averaging 3 sacks a game, they'll crank it up, and they'll even get more than that. You want to watch the next NFL guy? Cameron Thomas, defensive lineman, San Diego State, NFL-type guy. He's going to be on the quarterback all the time anyway. I wouldn't be surprised if they roll it away from him. The Boise State tackles have struggled with elite defensive linemen. This is the best line in the D-line. This is a major issue. UNLV hit them, though, on some deep passes, which I think is very promising. Boise State's going to have to do that as well. But the key to me will be the Boise State offense will have to come up with creative or any way to score and hold on to the football. You've got a situation where if Boise State gets behind in the game, no matter if their special team scores against them or whatever it is, and they get into we've got to throw the football because we can't run it, that's a big advantage for San Diego State. Because if you start panicking and trying to hit deeper throws and you get an interception or a couple of too many sacks and you lose your momentum, when the ball gets back to San Diego State, they're just going to run it. 12-play drive down the field. They'll take 3 or they'll take 6. Hank's going to have the most patience he's had on the entire season on this game coming up Friday morning. Boise State's defense against San Diego State's offense. It's a good thing San Diego State, you're facing the number 1 defense in the conference in points allowed, and the good thing is you got the number 2 defense on your side. Boise State's defense, I think, will do a great job against San Diego State. This San Diego State offense has scored 23 points or more only one time in the last 7 weeks. It's not explosive. That much is really still the same. You got an offensive line guy as the head coach in Hoke. It's a Rocky leftover program. It's a run-first bunch, ball control. Greg Bell is a hammering running back. They, 185 yards a game is what's they average. So I do believe that Boise State, of the 2 challenges that are presented to them to win or lose this football game, which will be one on the offensive or defensive lines, I think they can win the battle with the defensive front against San Diego State's O-line. I am way more concerned with the offensive line, certainly because of Stets and what he meant to that group. I see a low-scoring game, a field goal game. That gives me some hope with Boise State, who's very consistent there. How about this? There's not going to be much of a home crowd. First of all, we're talking about a soccer stadium about 115 miles away from San Diego State. So it's the Friday after Thanksgiving. They wouldn't go anyway. So why would they drive 115 miles? It's not like they have a great base of fans in San Pedro, Carson, California either. The kickoff is at 9 in the morning. So you got to get up early on the day after Thanksgiving for that. This is a made-for-TV event. And to me, as important as this game is, or we think it will be, because that could be spoiled on Thanksgiving Day with Fresno and San Jose State. But to have this in this situation is kind of a shame, but that's what it is. There's a lot on the line. As I mentioned, we know for Boise State, they've got to win and Air Force has to lose, and then they can get into the Mountain West Championship game. Fresno State, they've got to win their game on Thanksgiving Day, and they need San Diego State to lose, and then they win the tiebreaker to get into the championship game on the West Division. But if San Diego State beats Boise State, or if Fresno loses to San Jose on Thanksgiving, they're in. So you could have a situation at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 10 a.m. Mountain, 11 o'clock for me here in Flower Mound, where Boise State and San Diego State play, and San Diego State is already in the Mountain West Championship game. That's a big deal. And that will hurt their motivation, I feel, with a 9 a.m. kickoff for those kids in front of who? Family and friends. It's like a high school game. So that will be, I think, really important. And I wouldn't be surprised if coaches will, for San Diego State, handle that game a little bit differently. If they're already in the championship game, they're playing Boise State, you want to be careful you don't show too much on that tape. You want to be careful that if a guy is teetering with an ankle, a shoulder, or whatever his injuries are, there's no reason to do that. There's no reason to risk that. So that will be an important development for all of us to watch to see what happens. I hope you enjoy the Kingdom of Pod. I enjoy putting it together each week. You can rate it, review it, pass it along. You can subscribe to it. It's easy to get. It's just Boise State football individually and singularly. That's all we deal with here. If athletic department stories become important, I love those stories. I'd like to talk about them and give, hopefully, a fresh perspective or something different that you may not have considered when you hear about that story. College openings in football, there's 7 FBS jobs out there. We know Coach Pete's involved in the University of Washington search on the committee. The fact that Brian Harsin's name has come up could just be connections by media people saying, hey, he's in trouble. His friend, Coach Pete's on the selection committee. He's a Northwest guy. Maybe he'd want to bolt and go back. There's a lot of money that would have to change in these regards. If there is truly a vaccination challenge for Coach Harsin and he's not been vaccinated, that won't play well. It'll play way worse in Seattle. I refuse, and I don't think he is looking to change his address. I don't know how Mrs. Harsin or his family feels about it, and that could be a difference maker. There are challenges to not being from that area and being there as the coach's family when things are not going well. You've lost 3 games in a row. And remember, Coach Harsin went from, hey, Paul Feinbaum on his daily show, he's the leader in the clubhouse for the SEC Coach of the Year. Now, hey, let's ship him off to Washington. That's the kind of climate he's in. The name I do think that has more credence, and I do not think Coach Pete's coming back to coach football, by the way. Maybe as an assistant one day, but I don't think as a head coach in any of those jobs. Justin Wilcox's name is legit, and I think it's legit. It's too bad he's not legit for Southern Cal. I think he'd be great there. But with Coach Pete there at UW and his track record, I think he'd be great. We need to keep an eye on what happens at Oregon. Does Cristobal go back to Miami if they get rid of Diaz and go home, or does he go to LSU? And he's got some chops in the SEC with the time he spent there at Alabama. So this will all be unfolding here very quickly. But I do think that Wilcox is in play for Washington. I think it would be a better move for him, and I imagine Justin would want to do that. Speaking of former Boise State football coaches, I was just looking at the FCS playoffs, which, if you have not noticed, begin this Saturday or this weekend. And Dan Hawkins, the former Boise State head football coach, has the UC Davis Ags back in the playoffs again. And they're playing South Dakota State, who has more scholarships and a lot of different things than Hawk's group does. And they're an odds-on favorite to get back to the semifinals of the FCS, and Hawk's team has to go on the road. But I was just curious, the 4 years before Hawk took over back at UC Davis, the Davis team only won 26% of their games, and they never went to the playoffs. They were 12-33. Since Hawk has taken over, and we have to count the COVID season, so Hawk's really on year 5. Hawk has won 31 games. He's 31-21. He's won 60% of his games. He's been to the quarterfinals of the FCS playoffs, and now he's back in them again. He's done a tremendous job for his alma mater. The way they handle gender equity at UC Davis, they go by the books, and so they're careful about how many scholarships he has to give up. Sometimes coaches will cut scholarships in half and have half scholarships, right? Well, they still count that a little bit differently at Davis, so he's not always going to have the full allotment of schollies. But best of luck to Hawk. This interested me as well, and then we'll wrap this edition up. I know this isn't a Boise State football topic, but we know from watching Boise State this year, there needs to be a rebuild along the offensive and defensive lines. It's going to take a couple of years. It'd be very interesting to see the direction Andy goes here. I think the offensive line takes much longer to develop, but I also think at the same time, they can't wait. They've got to go get immediate help. The transfer portal and the junior college route. And they got to go now. And this is nothing that you don't know in watching me on this YouTube channel or listening here on the Kingdom of Pod, however you're doing this. So I was looking at the University of Utah and thinking, okay, you're not Stanford, you're not USC. Hell, you're not even Oregon. You're new to the conference. You're in the Intermountain West. You're in a better than average talent-rich football state. We forget how much football is played in the state of Utah. You got not only BYU and Utah, but you got Weber State and Utah State and Southern Utah. And I know I'm not mentioning some others that are in there. And they've got some FBS Division I football scholarships coming out of that state. They have a lot of Polynesian kids. The LDS church there is a magnet for Samoans, Polynesians, Hawaiians. They have relatives there. There's a lot of symmetry between all of those communities in Salt Lake, and I think they've done a tremendous job. And so I looked at the 9 guys that started their last game and beat the pants off of Oregon. And, we're talking about the number 2 rushing offense in the Pac-12 in Utah and the number 4 rush defense, but they're number 1 in the conference in sacks. They get after the quarterback. And traditionally, they have. Last year, the defensive line at Utah was amongst the best in the country, if not the best defensive line in the country. That's a tall statement for a program in Salt Lake City, Utah, competing with USC, Stanford, Oregon, and let alone Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Georgia, Ohio State. Let's not forget these other tremendous factories of offensive and defensive linemen, which I think is the key to having a dominant college football perennial playoff football program in Clemson. And so I just looked at their 9 guys and I said, okay, where'd they come from? How'd you get these 9 guys? Did you do what everybody says? You can't get them in the West Coast. You got to go to Georgia. You got to go to Mississippi. You got to go find them somewhere else. Well, that's not the case. Of those 9, 5 on the offensive line, 4 on the defensive line. 3 came out of Utah high schools. Now, where they came from in terms of did they move there from Hawaii or whatever, I can't comment on that. But I do know this. There's no more than 3 from Utah high schools. So 6 of the 9 didn't come from Utah. And there are, on the defensive line, those 4 kids, 3 of them are return missionaries. That's a heavy percentage of real men on the defensive line. A couple of them are from Southern California, 1 junior college transfer, 1 Texas high school kid, and 2 kids from Hawaii. So really, that's the territory they're pulling from. Hawaii, kids who have moved to Salt Lake City and are Polynesian. There's some LDS kids, I think, involved here that are tremendous contributors on offensive and defensive line. But at the end of the day, that's their recruiting territory. Is that a tall order? Can't USC do that or Stanford do that or UW or whoever? Utah does it. And one of the things that they do is that Polynesian connection. Look at Utah. Look at BYU. I know that's what they want to do at Utah State. I'm sure they want to do that at University of Washington. But hats off to Whittingham and how he has got that program put together. It's unbelievable. And watch him in the trenches. I hope you enjoy this, the Kingdom of Pod. Rate it, review it, pass it along, listen to it. Boise State, San Diego State coming up Friday. And I also hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving holiday.